Hello, is this Gerrit Graham?
It is.
Hello, Gerrit. This is Dustin Wilmus from KMSU Radio.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Okay.
It's great to have you on. First of all, I'm here with my co-host, Ton.
Hey there, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to have you here.
My pleasure. Where are you guys, actually? Where are you located?
We're about an hour south of Minneapolis.
My younger son, is probably in your name by now. He's moving from Northern California, from San Francisco to Chicago, and he's driving in a U-Haul truck with all his stuff and his car on a trailer behind him, and they're going, he and his girlfriend are going via Bozeman, Montana, which would put them right in about your latitude, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's quite a trek he's taking there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, he's used to it. You know, he grew up in Montana, and in Montana, a 2-hour drive is like going down to the grocery store.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if you're ready, we can get started here.
Speak. Off we go.
Well, can you tell us a bit about how you got started in acting?
Oh, well, it was always an extracurricular thing for me. It was something I did all the time anyway, you know. I mean, I can remember when I was really young, like third grade, fourth grade, my mother enrolling me in an after-school sort of artsy-fartsy program down at the Detroit Arts Institute, where we lived in that area at the time. You know, for kids there's something to do for them after school. Pretend you're a tree, be a bird, this type of stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And somebody, one of the instructors from an older group came in and said that they were looking for a couple of kids to play Rabbits, Friends, and Relations in a production of Winnie the Pooh that they were doing. And, me. And it's one of those miraculous things. I was chosen. And so I was on stage at the age of, I don't know, whatever I was there, 8 or 9 or something, in front of a big audience like that. And it just seemed the most natural thing in the world to me. And when I got to high school, high school, in you know, K through 6, I always got the choice parts. I was always Santa, you know, or President Washington, or whatever the featured male role was in the pageant. Somehow I always ended up with that. And then when I got to high school, I did it there as well. I went to boarding school in Massachusetts, and I became the head of the Dramatic Association there. And then when I got to college at Columbia, I was made head of the Dramatic Association, the Players. This is a sort of extracurricular deal there at Columbia, mostly because nobody else wanted to do it, I think. And one afternoon during a non-production period, I happened to be down in the Players' office in the basement of the Student Union building. Very unusual that I should be there at that time. And the phone rang, and I picked it up, and this guy said, hi, I'm trying to make a feature. I was president of the Players 10 years ago, and I'm hoping maybe I could get a little help from you guys, sort of for old time's sake. Sure, says I. Well, whatever you need. Well, you know, extras and maybe wardrobe and what have you. I said, of course. And he said, we're also looking for 2 or 3 leads for the thing. People with, preferably with experience and, funny people like that is what we're looking for. And you've got the graduate school up there, and you got the minor lady from Playhouse across the street at Barnard. And so if you know anybody, just send them on down. And he gave me an address, and I said, well, I sure will. I sure will do that. And your name? Brian, he says. So I wrote it down, and I never told anybody else. I went down there myself. And Brian turned out to be Brian De Palma. And one of the other guys who was there, I went 2 or 3 days in a row, and there were a variety of people. The one other constant, one other guy beside myself who was there every day was Bob, who turned out to be Robert De Niro. And this was while I was, freshman at Columbia. No, sophomore. And that movie, which was Brian's first sort of overground picture, if you like, was called Greetings, which at the time did very well for an independent feature, and I think prize in Cannes and stuff like that. And it was made for super cheap, 35 millimeter color, and the whole thing cost about $50,000, I think, which even then was a ridiculously small amount of money. And as more or less because of that experience, when it came time to go back for my junior year at Columbia, I decided. I thought about it. Do I really want to be a French lit major? Is this what I'm going to do with my life? It would have meant teaching prep school snots like myself how to speak French and so on. And this other possibility just opened in front of me because of that diploma picture. There was something else that I could do. I didn't have to go down that road. I could go down this road.
Sure.
And so I dropped out of Columbia and moved back to Chicago, which is where my parents were living at that point, and moved back in with them. They were really thrilled. And about a year later, Brian called me up and said he was making a sequel to Greetings, and did I want to be in it? Yes, I said, of course. And that picture is called Hi, Mom. And there's a sequence in there that a lot of people consider really hot stuff. Well, I won't, the details won't bore you with it, but after that, I got, I was admitted to the touring company at Second City in Chicago. You guys know what Second City is?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was in the touring company for a while, and then another few jobs after that, and then I heard from Brian again, because he was making a picture in L.A., and he said, this is a studio picture, you'll be able to get your Screen Actors Guild card and so on. And so I think if you were ever thinking of coming out to L.A., this would be the time. And that picture was called Phantom of the Paradise. And interestingly enough, the original casting of Phantom was that Paul Williams was going to play the Phantom, and I was going to play the Swan, the part that Paul eventually played.
Okay.
And Beef was going to be played by Peter Boyle, the late Peter Boyle. And then I can't remember what happened, but I think it was that Paul, because he essentially donated the music to the picture, and at the time he was a very highly sought-after songwriter, Oscar winner and so on, he gave his music to the movie, and on the condition that he be in it. And I think at a certain point he decided he didn't want to be the Phantom, he wanted to be Swan. And that's how I ended up with the role of Beef. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, obviously a lot of people know you from being in Phantom of the Paradise. Can you tell us a little bit about, what your thoughts were when you were making it? Some of your memories of this being on the set?
Well, I was young and stupid. I didn't really have a lot of experience to compare it to. And one of the Juicy Fruits, Peter Elbling, a.k.a. Harold Oblong, was a good friend of mine from L.A., and I knew Archie Hahn slightly, and so for us it was basically sort of a party. We had a lot of fun. I should say that because the prep each day for me for Beef was lengthy. All the fancy makeup and the glitter in my hair and ridiculous costumes and so on. It always took more time for me to get onto the set for anybody else. And the crew, I guess, decided pretty early on that I guess they probably figured I was Beef, So they started making life tough for me. The scene, and you've seen it, Phantom, I'm sure, yeah?
Yeah.
The scene, the rehearsal scene in which I trip and fall and have a tough time getting up. Mm-hmm. We had to shoot that, I think, 9 times because the cameraman kept saying, no, a little out of focus there. No, we got a hair in the gate. No, that's not going to work. And Brian finally said, what is going on? Can't we, let's get this and move on. And by this time, my belly was so red from falling on it that I had to have makeup put on it between takes. And then in the shower scene, the water kept getting colder and colder and colder. So every time I stepped into it, like this. And Brian eventually said, what's the problem? You sick or something? I said, no, the water's just a little cold. At that point, the entire crew burst out laughing. And I thought it was funny too, so I laughed along with them, and that's a lucky thing that I did, because at that point, the crew sort of embraced me as their buddy, their pet actor, or what have you, and so that made it even more fun. And they, of course, told me that the thing with the falling on my stomach, that was all just, they had it after a couple of takes. The rest of it was just torturing me. But they eventually, in Dallas, we shot in Dallas over Christmas, they gave me the plunger that the Phantom sticks me with in the shower. They gave me that as a present. They decorated it with shellac and put a bow on it with a note that said, "To beef, may you plunge your way to stardom." So it was fun. And as I say, I had not the slightest idea of some kind of career calculation. How is this going to make me? What kind of good? Am I going to get some fabulous agent, or am I going to be in Variety or whatever? And stuff like that never crossed my mind. I was living for the minute, day to day, and much of the role was improvised, which sort of reflects that mindset, just strictly in the moment. And after it was done, I went back to New York, which is where I was living at that point. And eventually, Brian called again and said, "Look, we're screening this all over the place, looking for a distributor. So this time, really, if you were contemplating coming to LA, now this time, because everybody in LA is going to see it, everybody in Hollywood is going to see it because of all these screenings." And that's the point at which I moved to LA. I was there for 22 years. And Brian was right. I got out there and started working right away. But it was a lark for me, that picture. I think the same was true for Peter, Harold, and Jessica, and Bill Finley, who, as I'm sure you know, died recently. Big loss.
Well, besides the Phantom of the Paradise, you were in a lot of other films around that time that are really kind of considered cult classics, Chopping Mall and TerrorVision and Class Reunion. What are your thoughts on kind of the cult classic films? I mean, is it frustrating at all to not have them be, super popular out of the gate, or are you okay with them becoming popular down the road, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would rather have them be popular than not, obviously. I do wish that one or another of the movies I was in had made a little money, because that would have changed my whole life, That would have changed my career. You're in a picture that makes money, all of a sudden you're a golden boy.
Sure.
The closest, the one that had the biggest shot of becoming a big, popular hit was Used Cars. But Columbia had no idea how to promote it. And one of the executive producers was Spielberg, Steven Spielberg. John Milius was another one. But there were no stars in it. Kurt wasn't a star, Russell, and I certainly wasn't, and Jack Warden was a very respected character actor, but very far from being a star. But no matter how funny it was, it wasn't really any star or big name to hang it on. So Columbia was sort of indifferent to it. But Spielberg and Zemeckis, the director, pleaded with Columbia for that reason, that it should be given its own little time slot to be released in just a few theaters, New York, L.A., Chicago, what have you, and a chance to build an audience rather than just throwing it into the shark tank. But that's what Columbia did. They released it in the same week as the Blues Brothers, The Empire Strikes Back, Blue Lagoon. I don't know if the same week, but the same short period.
Yeah.
So it didn't have a chance. It sank without a trace, which is a shame when you consider the success it's had since then. I think it could have been a big hit.
Yeah, Used Cars is a tremendous film. That is super hilarious, and
great
your
picture.
character is as well. Now, Cannonball, did that make much of a splash?
I don't think so. No.
I mean, was that still after the fact? I guess I'm young enough. I know when I first watched it, I was like, "Holy crap, Cannonball rocks!"
Yeah, no, it's a good picture. That's a very good movie too, in my opinion. And I had a ton of fun on that, playing that cowboy, Perman Waters. In my
Yes, hilarious.
Yeah, hilarious. And the woman playing my mom, Judy Canova, was a famous Hollywood comedian from 20 years, 30 years previous.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, she'd been all but forgotten. And the closest thing to a hot ticket in the movie was David Carradine. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But because it was a low-profile independent film, it was picked up by Corman, I think, Roger Corman, for distribution. And Roger Corman never put a whole lot of bucks into promoting any of his films. So as good as it was, I think it just, it was considered a second-tier or even third-tier film, and so most people have not seen it. Same is true with a movie like Philadelphia Experiment 2, which I think that's a very good movie, and I'm, for once, very fond of my own work in it. I like my own work in that, but it's the same thing. You can't, film in 99.9% of the time won't get anywhere if you don't promote it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very rare that people discover. All of these things were pre-internet, pre-web.
Sure.
There was no way for something to go viral fast enough for it to catch on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And word of mouth just isn't fast enough. If the studio isn't going to, for instance, in the case of used cars, because it didn't make huge bucks in the first couple of weekends, they stopped promoting it at all. These days, going viral might have saved it right away,
Mm-hmm.
but at that time we were relying on word of mouth, and word of mouth just doesn't move fast enough.
Well, regardless of, I guess, the success or, lack of or whatever of your films, I would say you're one of those guys, if someone sees your face, they recognize it, and they've seen you someplace. I mean, you've been on tons of TV shows as well, right?
Yep.
I mean, A-Team, Miami Vice,
Yep,
one of my
shows.
personal favorites, I think you're only on one episode, but Sledgehammer.
Oh,
I
man,
love
I
that
can't
show.
even. I don't even remember doing that.
Man.
Wow.
I've been trying to get David
Sledgehammer.
Rash on the phone for years.
Of course I did that. And David Rashi was a guy I'd known for years, since the Second City period, which was 68, 69. I'd known him forever.
Yeah, I mean, so when you were doing all this stuff, I mean, you just kind of keep going. It's just like work as usual. Because, I mean, in my mind, you're definitely one of those kind of cult actors that I think everyone would know your face if they seen it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, what kind of actor did you say?
Well, like you have some cult fame, I would say. Like people that know your work definitely know who you are.
People have said to me over the years, "Oh, you're a star," and my reaction to that is, "No, I'm not a star. I'm a working actor."
Mm-hmm.
Which is not quite the same thing. And as you say, people recognize me, but a bunch of the time they think it's me because they went to high school with me, Very familiar face, but they don't really know from exactly where.
Yeah.
And there have been times when people have asked me, strangers, well, what do you do for a living? And when I say, well, I'm an actor, then they get it right away. Oh,
Sure.
yeah, I saw you on this, I saw you on that. But... I was a working actor of the sort that doesn't really exist anymore because the economics of the business have changed so drastically. I was very fortunate. I I worked steadily for the entire time I was out there. I worked steadily, and not everything was a Class A picture or a top of the line show, but there were some. I did a couple of episodes of 2 different versions of Star Trek. And I was in a couple of series. I was a regular in a couple of series. There was one I did in New York called Now and Again, which was a very good show, and CBS canceled it pretty much as soon as they could get away with it. But that was an excellent show. It was the brainchild of Glenn Gordon Caron, whose previous big hit was Moonlighting.
Sure.
You may remember, it was the vehicle that put Bruce Willis on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say one thing that I'm a huge fan of as far as your TV work goes is when you did voiceover work for the Critic.
Loved it. What a great gig. You didn't even have to shave, man. A couple of days a week, you would stand in a dark room with some of the other funniest people in Hollywood and have a blast. What a wonderful gig that was. Loved it. And plus, it was great material, great writing. I had some fantastic lines in it, too, because the writers felt they could write anything for my character because he was so completely off the wall. There was one episode I recall that was sort of a New Year's show, and my line, I appear in a diaper. And my line was, "Look, everybody, who wants to party with Baby 39?" Lines I've ever said in anything ever. Great line. So yeah, the Critic is terrific, and it has still a lot of fans. You know, they put it out in a box set, so it has enough fans for that to happen. And I have a friend here, actually, the daughter of a friend, I should say, who at the time was just getting started in a graphic novel career, but she loved the Critic. So, and she was basically a third of my age at the time. So it had an audience, and really, it had a real audience. You know, it just never, like so many things in my career, it just never quite took off.
Well, is there anything you're working on right now that you want to mention, or did you say that you're kind of out of the game as far as?
I've been forced out of the game because of some physical problems. I can't. I could never do a play. I don't think at this point. Too much standing up. If you see what I'm saying.
Okay.
And the same basic problem would be the case with a TV show or a movie, except that it would be easier because the cut between takes, you have a chance to sit down, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided at one point that I was sort of stuck with the Perry Mason rules, if you know what I'm talking about. The wheelchair rules. But the other problem I had is that after the last job I had, was it? Yeah, I think it was the last job I had, which was an ABC Movie of the Week down in Puerto Rico. My agents declined to re-sign me. I can't tell you why, but that's what happened. And I live about 100 miles north of New York City, and it was difficult for me to figure out how to get another agent, and so the people I had been with, that was the New York office of my L.A. agents, I think, too long ago now. No, I guess I got that agent. I got them when I got to town. But things change, things change.
Yeah.
What I would love to be doing right now is audiobooks. But it turns out that's a pretty tough nut to crack. That's a pretty closed shop. Tough one to get into. But God, I would love to be doing that. So if you know anybody who would like me to read his or her book, please call me right away.
Yeah, if either of us ever writes one, we'll definitely give you a call for sure.
Yeah. I'm dead serious about that. As is the case with any kind of acting, stage or movies or TV or dance or whatever, the first gig is the one that's toughest to get. Once you get that first gig, then everything else is easier because people don't feel that they have to take a chance on you. Someone else is taking the first chance. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that first gig, that's what I need, is that first voice gig. But as you know, because we were just talking about it, I had a voice career out in L.A. I was really having a good time with it. I did a couple of other cartoons. I was a recurring character on The Tick, for instance, and there were a couple of others. And I did some commercial voiceovers, for TV ads and stuff like that.
Okay.
And when I got back here, I wanted to keep that happening, and in this case, it was the New York office of my LA voice agent. But the way it works in New York, it's pretty much all commercial work rather than cartoons. And my agents would call me at 10 in the morning and say, "All right, we got to read for you at 11:30 on Madison at 37th Street." And I would have to say, "Yeah, but I'm 3 hours away." And eventually, it became clear to them and me that there wasn't any real way to pursue it. I would have had to have been living in the city. If I'd been living in the city, it would have been different, of course. But
yeah.
This far out of town, I moved back to this place, 100 miles from the river, north of the city, for family reasons. And I certainly don't regret that, but it took me out of the action a bit. I was no longer swimming in the same pool as the rest of the actors. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Sure, yeah.
I just wasn't as present as I had been out in L.A.
Well, we want to say that you've been involved in one way or another in a lot of stuff that we really love, and it's been an honor to have you on today. Is there anything you want to leave us with, or any parting thoughts?
Gee whiz. I would just say that having a career that was heavy in the kind of thing we're talking about, Chopping Ball, for instance, and TerrorVision, which I saw again recently. It's pretty wacky. TerrorVision is pretty wacky.
Beautiful film.
Having a career that was heavy on that kind of thing was nothing I ever imagined. It's not something I deliberately sought out. I had a great friend from Chicago who was out in L.A. at the same time as me, a guy named Bob Greenberg, who was, I'm sorry to say, hit by a drunk driver and killed. But he's the one who got me into Chopping Ball and a few other things, because he called me up and said, look, will you play this part in this thing as a friend? It's being directed by a guy I know. And do you know what I'm saying? So it was not a question of auditioning or anything. Or someone else with that kind of connection would call me up and give me a role in something like Chopping Ball, which is how I ended up in those things. But it's been a special kind of rewarding, because it's a special kind of fan, the sci-fi and fantasy fan. They're not like the regular movie fans. I don't think they're more dedicated. They're more knowledgeable about what it is that they care about. A good example of that is the Star Trek conventions. You ever been to one of those? It's a whole city unto itself.
Yeah, those people are serious.
Serious is the word. So it's been fun. It's nice to feel appreciated,
Yeah, well, we definitely appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you to say.
Great. Well, I'm really glad we got you on the show here. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and it's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Great. My pleasure, and thank you very much for your interest.
No problem.
Of course.
It's flattering. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, thanks a lot, Gerrit, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much. Same to you guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.